In this video, I'm going to go through the bank reconciliation question Ludicrous Limited. This is a challenging bank reconciliation question. It contains really every conceivable issue that a bank reconciliation question presents. So looking at the question itself, you've first of all got the bank statement for the particular month. So for March 2020, and you can see the details of it here. So all the opening balance at the start of the month, the withdrawals from the bank and the lodgements to the bank, and you've got a closing balance there, €303.99 credit. Okay, and moving ahead, you have the typical sort of disclaimer note that you can assume that the figures shown in the above bank statement are correct if there is a difference between them and the corresponding values shown in the following day books. And debit on the statement means the balance is overdrawn. There were a few instances where the balance was noted as overdrawn, but by the end of the month things had picked up and they have a credit balance in the statement as a positive balance. They've actually got money in the bank according to the statement at the end of March. The next piece of data you're given is the cash receipts daybook for March 2020. So again, this just is the details that we record in the month for all the cash received, and you can see that the total, which is a figure that we will use in our solution, of the cash receipts is €15,677.50. So again, a learning point, or kind of a point to take note of, is that the totals of the day books are used, and that's always going to be the case in these questions. So you could make it a kind of a point of highlighting them if you're faced with such a question, to highlight them and make sure that you know where the values are used. You've got the check payments book as well. Excuse me. So we've got checks ranging from number 327 through to 339, and again our total checks amount to 8,807 in the month. So again, that total, which I've circled, will be used in our solution. And the final piece of information, the other information, the reconciled ledger balance, nominal ledger balance at the end of February 2020 was 8,050.71 credit. Now, it's this particular innocuous looking sentence that makes the question that little bit more challenging, although there are other elements within the question that are challenging. But we're not told precisely how that 8,050.71 balance was arrived at. And we'll have to do a little bit of reverse engineering to figure out that, as you'll see in the solution. So you're asked to prepare the nominal ledger bank account for March and reconcile the ledger balance to the bank statement at the end of March. So I'm going to switch now to the solution, which is in Excel, and just talk through that. Okay, so this is the solution screen, and what I've done is I've shown the cash receipts book with my €15,677 and my check payments book, again checks number 327 to 339 with my 8807, and I've got the bank statement here. Okay, so I've got all the components needed for the solution. Now, the first step in the solution, and this is kind of almost like a form of working, is you have to match off the contents of the day books against the bank statement. So this is the relatively easy bit. You're just ticking off items if you see them in both the day book and the statement. So looking at the 245, you can see I've got 245 lodgements there and a 245 here, so I can just tick it in each case. The 5,000 okay, so again the process is pretty straightforward. 902.50, 640 and 640. We've got a 50 there. We've 1,300 here. Okay, we have 250 there. Don't have the 570, 3,500. 250. Okay. We've got 250. Okay, and that appears to be that. So there's a few items unmarked on the cash receipts book, and also a few items still unmarked on the bank statement. Now I do much the same then for the check payments book, so scroll across there. And again, it's easier to go really from the bank statement to the daybook, because on the bank statement, the check numbers will be random, whereas here they're in sequence, so it's much easier to take a number and then find it in this list here. So check 327 is there. 318, okay, that's obviously an old check. 329, 1370. Check 332, okay, for €95. 328, okay, 121. 333 is there. Excuse me. Standing order isn't there. 620. Check 330 for 620. Check 336 for 410. Now we have a problem with this one. I'm just going to highlight this in a particular way. 336 here is written as 140, and here it's written as 410. So I'm just going to highlight the check numbers. Can't take it off because they don't match, and I need to make the correction before I can take it off. So I'm just going to highlight it for the moment, and we will come back to it in the course of the solution. Okay, the 9680 isn't there, and check 335 for 2000 is there. Okay, so we've got the items marked off as best we can. And what I'm now going to look at is the next part of the process, where we start to look at the nominal ledger. So I'm just going to split the screen. So we have our bank nominal ledger account here. This is where I'm going to be focusing for the moment. Now the excuse me. The starting point is the opening balance, and we got this from the question. If I just go back to the question, you were told that the reconciled nominal ledger bank balance at the end of February was 8,050.71 credit. Okay, so on the credit side. So if we go back here. Okay, so the opening balance is going to be indicated here. Okay, so 8,050.71 is the opening balance, and the other thing we need to do is put in our total of the cash receipts and our totals of the check payments book. So the total cash receipts, okay, goes in there, and the total of the check payments book goes in there. Okay, so that's those 15,677 on the debit side of the ledger account and 8807 on the credit side. Now what we need to do is we need to look at the contents of the bank statement. So I'm going to momentarily split the screen differently. And it's the unmarked items in this that we need to contend with. But we have an issue to deal with before we can start to enter those. And it's because of this, and going back to my question, this statement here, the reconciled nominal ledger bank balance at the end of February 2020 was 8,050.71 credit. Now the difficulty is that we don't know how that has been arrived at. So we have to do a little bit of a calculation to check that out. And I'm going to shift to a working sheet just to do a little bit of a demonstration here. Okay, so what we're doing is we're working out last month's bank reconciliation. Now the reason we need to do this is that a bank reconciliation shows items, lodgements and payments which haven't appeared in the bank statement by the end of that particular month. Okay, so we have recorded, say, a lodgement for €500 in our cash receipts book, but it hasn't gone through the bank statement. So that €500 will appear in our bank reconciliation. Okay, and what we need to be careful is when we're doing the current month's reconciliation that we don't assume that because they aren't ticked on the current bank statement that they have to go into the nominal ledger this time, because we've actually put them into the nominal ledger. Okay, last month we recorded them, but they hadn't appeared in the statement. Now this time they appear in the statement, so we don't want to sort of say, oh, there's an item on the statement that hasn't been recorded by us. In fact, it has been. So we have to identify them. Now the question is how to do that. So how do we identify these items? Okay, well, what we need to do is understand how a bank reconciliation layout is made up. Okay, so you've got four main elements as follows. So you start with the balance per bank statement at the end of the month, whatever that is, and you can see I have a note later about that. You deduct outstanding checks, Okay, and these are the checks that we have written which haven't appeared on the bank statement, so they'd be items unmarked on the check payments book. We add outstanding lodgements, so these would be items unmarked on last month's cash receipts book, and that gives us the balance reconciled to the nominal ledger. Now, some of the notes about these things. So the first thing, the balance per bank statement at the end of last month, well, we get this from the bank statement that is in the question, the first balance on the statement. So if I just show the extract, if you look at the question where the bank statement is given, there's the balance that was provided, €300.71 debit, which means overdrawn. Okay, so we'll be using that as that value there. Outstanding checks. Now we need to identify outstanding checks, and the way we identify these is we look at what was the first check number that we wrote this month. Okay, and if I just show the check payments extract, the very first check that we wrote was check number 327. So we can assume that any check prior to number 327, which appears on the bank statement this month, must have been written last month. So it must have been an outstanding check that we wrote last month, which wasn't on last month's bank statement, but here it is now. Okay, so we can treat it as an outstanding item. The outstanding lodgements, we often have to just work that out by a process of elimination. So it's usually the last thing we figure out. It's not like we have a lodgement reference that we can rely upon, similar to the check number. So the balance reconciled to the nominal ledger, we were given that in the question. It's the 8,070 overdrawn. So this is the other information where you were told that the reconciled nominal ledger balance at the end of February was 8,050.71 credit. So we have pieces of information that we can use to construct our bank reconciliation for last month. Okay, so we start with the balance. Okay, and again, just showing that was 300.71. It was a negative balance because it was overdrawn. The outstanding checks, we know that any check prior to number 327 that we see on the bank statement this time must be an old check, an outstanding check from last month. And if I momentarily go back to my first worksheet, okay, there was check 318. Okay, I'll just highlight that in red maybe. Okay, and that has to be an old check that we recorded last month. There were no other checks that we recorded last month appearing now. So that 8750 is an old check, an old outstanding check. That gives us a negative 9,050.71. Now we know that the reconciled balance has to be 8,050.71. So we must have had an outstanding lodgement of €1,000, because there's our 8,050.71 negative. And if we look at the bank statement to see is there €1,000 lodgement appearing on it this month that hasn't yet been marked, well, there it is. So that item there is another outstanding item. So what we can now do is, and I'm just going to focus now on this question, this worksheet. If I just show what we've calculated. Okay, I'm going to remove the split. Okay, this is what I had worked out. So I can now say that the 8750 can be marked off. Okay, so if I can just slightly move across there. So I'll just highlight that, 8750, highlight it in that colour. And the 1,000 can be marked off. Okay, so the €1,000 can be marked off. And what we're now left with is a couple of unmarked items on the statement that we now can process in the ledger. Okay, so going back now to my ledger, I want to look at the items that are unmarked on the statement that need to be dealt with by us this time. Okay, so just increase the split a little bit there. Okay, so we have a direct debit for a pension payment. Well, this is a payment. Okay, so we'll just highlight that. €800, that's now dealt with. We have a standing order for 250, so we'll highlight that. And we've got this check here that went in as 410, and we had written it in as 140. Now, what we were told in the question, if I momentarily go back to the question, is that if there's a difference between the bank statement and the day books, we assume that the figures shown in the bank statement are correct. Okay, so that's the important principle that we are going to apply now. So if the figure is shown as 410 in the bank statement, but only 140 in the day book, we assume that the bank statement figure is correct. So going back then, our check payments book showed 140 euros. It should have been 410. In other words, we were too low by 270 euros. Okay, 410 minus 140 is 270 euros. So we're going to put in an extra 270 euros. Okay, a correction. I might just highlight that in red just to make it stand out. Okay, and that will now deal with that. Okay, and that's now sorted as well. Okay, and just see, are there any others? There's a direct debit for 96.80. Okay, so direct debit for 96.80. And that deals with all the items unmarked on the payments part of the statement. In terms of the receipts, we have a 200 and a 400. Okay, so again, I'll just change the split here so that it's easier to see things. Okay, so we've got a 200 and we've got a 400. Okay, so these are the unmarked items on the statement. And now if I balance off the account, I get a closing balance of 1997. So I'm just going to highlight that balance there. And we're going to, excuse me, we're going to see, can we reconcile that to the current bank statement? Okay, so let's just adjust the screen so that we can sort of see things more clearly. Okay, so to do a bank reconciliation, we start with our bank statement balance at the end of March. Okay, so bank statement balance at the end of March. Well, I need to show my statement. Okay, so that is €303.99. And then we adjust that for anything unmarked on the day books. So we've got a 570 and a 720 in cash receipts, and we've got these checks here unmarked on the check payments book. So we're going to add the outstanding lodgements. Okay, so we've got a 570 and a 720. This is March 16th and March 30th. Okay, so we just highlight those. Okay, 570 and 720. And then we've got a series of checks, 331, 334, and then the last three. So deduct those checks. Okay, so that is 310, 1500, and we've got 37, 38, and 39. Okay, and when I add up all those checks, they add up to negative 3591. And your mathematics then hopefully will show you that this figure here is 1997.01, which matches what I had in the ledger. So that completes the solution. As I say, it's quite a challenging question, and it's definitely worth going back over the video to ensure that you understand the points that I highlighted.